Okay, we got a BYBA, has no lockup, P0740 code, TCC stuck off, or system failure, P0730 incorrect gear ratio, P0780 shift malfunction. Now a lot of times when you get the P0730 and the P0780 together, this linear solenoid tends to be bad. So we may be replacing that. My suggestion to you on these linear solenoids especially, don't skimp out on these. You want to do factory. If you can't afford the new ones, go somewhere and find you some good used ones. You do not want to do Rostra on those. I have had almost zero success with them. So if you want to use them at your own risk. 10 millimeter on most of this. I don't remember taking that out, so I guess the R&R guy did it. That or I had a brain fart. Alright, 12 millimeters on these two. $17 millimeters on the Banjo Bolts. You do have to be careful on one of these models. I'm not sure which one it was. I'll say maybe it was the BDGA. Anyway, one of them, all three of the Banjo Bolts they look like this. Wouldn't have this tube on here, but the shoulder is a little different for the one that goes over here, so you want to keep an eye on that. This here is called a jet kit. Not all of them have this. It is supposed to be an upgrade if you want to do it. Alright, mark your solenoids. And the speed sensors are the same, but I keep them where they were. It's our vent. In behind this solenoid is a little tube. You want to make sure and get that. It does have a little screen on the end of it. You want to make sure that it gets cleaned out. Depending on which model you're working with, there's push-in and screw-in filters here. This is a screw-in, obviously. If it was the push-in, it would have a little housing here, and the cover would bolt on. Okay, there's 3 tubes here. They each have a screen on them, and then there are return pipe. Pressure sensors, you want to keep track of which one was where. Usually this one's brown and this one's black, but not always, and they're stepped and not stepped. And I'll show you what I mean by stepped here in a minute. Okay, see how it's got a raised area here? That's stepped. If it was not stepped, it'd be flat right here at the base of this. Keep these washers. You do not always get them in the kit. You might need to flat file them. I think I got them all. And 14 millimeters on the main case. Alright, I believe we can flip this up now. And make sure we're getting all this. This is your temperature sensor. Alright, there's several areas around here that you can knock up on the case. There's one up here, one right here, one over here. Didn't get them all, did I not? Yeah, it's coming up. Alright, take this tube back out and put it back where it was. You can leave these tubes in there. Take this accumulator out. Just a wire clip. You got your retainer, a spring. I have seen a couple of these springs broke in their accumulator. Set this off to the side. We can deal with that later. Go ahead and pull our park out. Come on. There's a tab here we need to bend up. $10mm. Go ahead and pull that down into manual low. There's a pin in there in this shaft. It's got to line up with a slot in the case so the case can come off. $12mm on that. Inch and 5/16 on the nuts. This one's right-handed. These two are left-handed. There's washers underneath each one. If you can't hit this straight, you're going to need to put a puller or something on it. I just give this a couple whacks. I get 2 heel bars. This board's right in my way. Come on. Because we're on camera. You want to be that way. There we go. There's a washer here. I'll just get heel bars on this also. You put pullers on it if you want to. This here, I use an air hammer with a flat bit. Alright, we have flat bearing, cage bearing, a flat bearing, and our race. I just make sure it's all okay, usually it is, and zip tie it together. Take your shaft and move it back and forth. We got a fair amount of play in this case. It will work like that, but you can end up developing noises. So both of these here are got a fair amount of play. This one's worse than the other one. This case really needs to be sleeved. A washer, 2 caged bearings. I'll leave this drum together for the momentary. There's a spot here and a spot here. I get 2 pry bars. I got those 2 ends. This one's a little wider. I use that on this end. This one over here. These dowel pins get kind of rusted, and they can be a little bit difficult getting this up sometimes. Alright, this one's going to be difficult. It's starting to come. Alright, usually not quite that difficult. There's something about putting stuff on camera. Everything wants to be more difficult. Make sure your gear is back. Come on, baby. There we go. Our idler gear. This washer sits on there. This washer sits in the back of that case for that idler gear. We have another tab here we need to bend out. Yep. 10mm. Pull our gears off of here. Make sure our teeth are okay where the slider comes up. Yeah, cage bearing. fork, and our slider goes with the raised up. Make sure our fork pads are okay. This goes with the recessed area facing up. Make sure our gear's okay where the slider goes in, and the cage bearing. Go ahead and pull this gear off. Make sure this is all okay. Usually it is. Alright. 2 cage bearings, flat bearing, and a race. And a flat bearing on top. Our main shaft. Make sure we're all okay here. Like I said, normally we are. Flat bearing, cage bearing, flat bearing and race. I'm about to run out of zip ties. We got another Honda in here at the same time, so I used to have enough to do 2. I do a fair amount of Hondas. Our counter shaft, our secondary shaft, counter shaft. You can leave all this together. Differential. Make sure that our pins aren't coming out. Bearings okay. Spider gears look okay. And check our backlash. Okay. This here. Need a pair of snap ring pliers. Take our retainer off. There's 2 half moon clips here. They're going to fall out. We got a race, a flat bearing, 2 cage bearings, and another flat bearing. Make sure our shaft is okay. Looking good. This sprag here is usually always getting close to being bad. If you can take that thing and spin it, and it just keeps spinning like that, this needs to be replaced. So whether you do it with the early 700 sprag or you do the Honda sprag, either way it needs to be replaced. So we'll go ahead and take our valve buddy off. All of this is 10 millimeters except for 3/12s at the bottom. There's no need to take that bolt and that plate off, just leave it on there. You're gonna be like that, aren't you? Make sure this is not ring cut where the main shaft sealing rings go. Every once in a while it is. Alright, since I'm out of zip ties, I'm going to take all that apart right this momentary and tell you how it's done. You need to check your pump gear back here. If it's going to be worn out, usually it's in this pocket right here. You put your gear in there and check your clearance on it. Usually you can see it. Alright. Probably not going to get that dowel pin out. Just take some sandpaper and sand that down. It's better to just leave it in there. With this drain, take a look at our clutches. I'm not going to take the drums apart for right now since I'm out of zip ties. Because I zip tie all mine together. So we'll just look at them. Pretty decent looking still. Usually they are. What'll start happening is the lining will start flaking off, so even if they look good, you want to replace them. This drum, I mark it, make it easier on me. I zip tie this whole thing together. This way I know which one goes on which side quickly. I mean, I can figure it out, but it's all about time management. Alright, see it still's a little grooved, so it's going to need a steel there. It will work like that. You might have a little bumpier shift. Most of them do on the bottom steel groove it just a little bit where that goes. Usually if one's burnt, it's the thirds. And there's two different ones. There's 24 teeth and 20 teeth. The clutches are physically bigger. And the steels, of course, have more teeth on them. It should be a 20 tooth. Yeah, 20 teeth. And these like to get burnt like that. So this is going to need steels. But once it gets so far, what ends up happening is this is going to come up and bottom out, and it'll spin this whole thing, and it'll end up destroying this clip, the cage, the return spring, and usually you can buff the piston out because all you need it to do is sit flat. But if you want to replace the piston, they have all that stuff now. It used to be we used to have to cut our own spring for it, but now you can buy all this stuff. So on the sprag here, this race right here drives out. You need a bushing driver to get down inside of there, and it'll pop out. You want to mark your sprag which way is turning. So I just mark on the top of here. There's a snap ring on this side. You pull the snap ring out and this gear will come off. Then you can drive the race and the sprag out of there and change it. Okay, so this one we're going to take a chance on the linear solenoid for the moment. I'd rather run the factory one than the others. We'll check all the pressures once it gets back in there. We can change that from the outside if we need to be. Usually what happens is the converters fell on these things. They go through and they plug up the filters on this. People keep driving it, end up burning the thirds and more if they keep going. But it starts right there. On all these Hondas, you're going to want to, my recommendation is to put a radiator and an auxiliary cooler on it. You can get by with just the auxiliary cooler, but really you need to put a radiator on it. What's going to happen is that if you don't, you cannot flush that radiator out. It'll, you will think that you are, but you're not. It just bypasses it, so you cannot flush all that clutch material out of that radiator, so it needs to be replaced. It's just going to go around it. If you're not going to replace your radiator, you've got to put an auxiliary cooler on it. Put the biggest one that you can fit on there. So this one's going to get an LS kit. The third steels, sleeve the case, sprag, torque converter. I think that was it for this one. Oh, 2 Sonex end plug kits for the valve body. A spin-on outside filter. I think that's it for this one. Alright, we'll catch you on the next one.